Hello and welcome to the Monster Mechanics Podcast, where we take creatures of myth and media and see how they can be improved. I am your host, Scott Paladin, and with me as always is the cream part of the Oreo to my cookie part of the Oreo, Zach Jaquays. What are we talking about today, Zach?
Today we are talking about Kaiju.
So Kaiju, if anyone's unfamiliar with this kind of modern terminology, Kaiju are Godzilla and King Kong and
Gamera.
Yes, I love Gamera. Any kind of just really big monster. That is the oeuvre of Kaiju. As far as history goes, as a concept, they really start with King Kong. There isn't like a big, long history of just the giant creature as like a story element. There are examples of them, but they weren't made the center of a story the same way that they do when you get to things like King Kong, and then later, I think, probably better exemplified in Godzilla, which is why we end up using a Japanese loanword to describe them.
Sure. I mean, Godzilla is kind of your classic example.
King of the monsters. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And he's just, honestly, he's still the best. Like, I think everybody has their favorite, but he's the Superman of the Kaiju world.
He really is.
Yeah. If you're going to incorporate them into a mythical world, into a story, and you want to make them make sense, you have to deal with the fact that scale does not work that way, because three-dimensional creatures, when you make them twice as big, increase by cubes instead. Yeah. So if you double something's height, it's not just doubled, but it's taken to the power instead. It's exponential, which means that if you take gorillas in the example of King Kong, gorillas are like 4 feet tall. If you make it 12 feet tall, it's going to weigh like an order of magnitude more.
Absolutely.
And for the same way that an ant can lift 10 times its own weight because it happens to be very small and it benefits from these kind of cube laws, you make them huge, it's exact opposite. They won't even be able to stand up. That's why elephants have such huge, thick legs, is because they're holding up a lot of weight. And it's why the largest creature to have ever been on the earth is the blue whale. It's because it's not having to support itself. It is supported by the medium it's in, which is water. So you could take the approach of trying to say, oh, this is a really big creature in our world, and it'll be subject to the same physical laws that we might have, but it's going to look weird. I mean, like you're
basically end up with like a mountain-shaped creature.
Exactly. It's going to be kind of pile-shaped with just massive legs. It's not going to be bipedal. It might not even be quadrupedal. It might have to have like pillars underneath, like not just at its edges to hold up, not around the edge of its body, but even in the middle to hold up the middle of its body as well. You could imagine it as like a jellyfish style creature, something huge, and then also it has just tons and tons of supporting tentacles, except not spindly little tentacles. These things are going to be
like squat, fat, slow-looking things. Yeah,
they're going to be tree trunks moving through the world, which is kind of interesting.
It's interesting, but it kind of limits you in what you can get away with.
I also, frankly, I think that's not really a kaiju. Like, if it's the size of a city and it comes in and it attacks you, but it's not like a monster. Like, it's not it's so alien and so weird that it doesn't.
We're kind of in Elder God territory.
Yeah, it starts to be less familiar. And I think a certain amount of the kaiju appeal is that they're just big monsters, like they're big familiar things. Like the game Rampage. I love the game Rampage.
Oh, yeah.
Where it is literally, it starts with a tiny creature and they take a serum and they get huge. And then you go and you wreck buildings. You identify with them in that. Okay, so if you liked Rampage, who was your Rampage?
I think I always played Lizzie.
Lizzie's good. I was always super disappointed because I first played the arcade where they had the wolf.
Yeah, the Ralph
the Wolf. And I loved Ralph the Wolf, but then we got the Nintendo game and he's not in it.
Oh.
Which is so disappointing.
Who did they replace him with, or was it just two characters?
It was just two characters.
That's terrible.
Yeah. That being said, the one good thing about that game was it had infinite continues. And when you're a terrible little child who's very bad at video games and has a sister who's even worse, that is the perfect game because you can just keep playing.
There you go.
So if we're going to make kaiju work in a world, I think we have to come up with a way for them to circumvent physics. Yeah. I think we need to give a reason why we can just ignore all of the problems that they physically come up with. And the idea that I was floating around with since we talked about this was that they're essentially shadow puppets.
Okay. Yeah.
Where rather than being a physical thing, kaiju are mostly just like an illusion. They're a spellcaster, a regular guy, creates the image of a giant creature. and maybe gives them just enough substantialness that they can kind of interact with the world.
By kind of interact, you mean destroy cities, etc.
The more damage that these things can do to the cities, I think the more power you have to put into them. Like if it's going to knock over a building, you have to put in the magical energy equal to what it would take to knock over the building. So the ideal thing is that you make one of these creatures and then they scare off like an enemy army, because I'm sort of imagining it as an arms race kind of idea where like you have a big army who's going to overwhelm a little army. And the little army knows about it, and they're like, okay, what do we do? And so they have a mage there who's like, well, I'm going to cast Major Illusion or something like that. And they make, let's just say they make Godzilla. They make a giant lizard creature that can that's got glowing spines or something, really terrifying. And they make it, and they do a good job of selling the illusion. And on the day of the battle, whatever checks need to be passed by the DM, and at the end of the day, the other army runs away.
Okay.
And so they've without having to do all that much, they win.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to keep a secret like that completely closed in, especially if you try it again later.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the more that it's going to be kind of known that, I see, like another mage watching that fight would go, that is not a real.
Sure. And there's going to be, country espionage and whatnot, where they're going to be like, hey, where are they keeping their giant fire-breathing lizard?
Exactly.
Where is it? We can't find it.
So they start to figure it out, and then the rematch comes around, and this time the army that ran away has their own illusion.
There you go.
And one of the things I would love is the idea that you create these illusionary creatures, but they can interact with each other just fine. Like you have to put a bunch of extra energy to make them interact with the physical world. But having the big lizard that the first army created fight the giant wolf that the second army created, that's not a problem. So, you have the second army create this, and then they go to battle with each other. And that, while at the same time, maybe the armies beneath it are fighting each other. Now they think it's a level playing field. But if your giant creature loses its fight, that's going to break the morale of the army beneath it.
Sure.
And everybody in charge of all these armies knows what's going on. But none of the people on the ground really do.
Sure.
And this sort of, as this mode of war spreads through the world and becomes more common, the armies tend to get smaller and smaller because it matters less what the size of your army is if it turns out that your giant illusory creature is going to win or not. And then at a certain point, they're like, you know what? These armies are kind of expensive. So let's just, as long as you can maintain the illusion that we're protected by having a giant illusory creature, then that accomplishes the same thing at much less of a cost.
Interesting.
And so you end up in a world where every city, state, and country has their mascot, has their own Godzilla, their own Kaiju, their Godzilla or their Gamera, or I'm thinking of I'm missing Mecha Godzilla is in the Mothra, right? And the wildness of their physiologies makes a lot more sense if it's literally some guy character designing these creatures. Like it's all about the creativity.
Interesting.
And then you get to a point at the end of it where, or not the end, you get as this becomes more common, you get to a point where lots and lots of people know that it's fake, but the power comes in everybody sort of playing along.
Interesting.
And that idea, I think, meshes perfectly with kayfabe.
What's that?
Kayfabe is in pro wrestling. Everybody sort of maintains what's the word? It's not even illusion. They all sort of pretend like it's real.
Okay.
And everybody acts like it's real all the time. And they call that kayfabe, where everybody knows it's not real. Like everybody knows the storylines are planned. Everybody knows that they're selling the punches. But it's more fun if you pretend like it's a real thing. Like it pretends like it matters and like nothing's being scripted out or anything like that. So the magic comes from selling it like it's real. And that you take that same idea and you apply it instead onto a macro scale of this is a world where everybody's armies basically run off that, because they know if you break the illusion and just admit none of this is really true, like these creatures aren't really dangerous in and of themselves, then we all have to have armies again, and people are actually going to fight battles and die. And this way is much better because we just have these fake things fight.
I feel like this is a fantastic setting for a sort of Emperor's New Clothes style of story.
It very well could. Or you take it sort of lighthearted and just it's an excuse for you to have giant lizard battles.
Well, sure, yeah.
Which I think is fun. I think that is an end in of itself if you want to have a giant lizard fight a giant wolf.
So is it just like a gentleman's agreement? Like our country surrenders if your giant lizard beats our giant donkey.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of like nobody's maintaining a real army anymore. So there's sort of rules to the game. And you know that if you push it too far, somebody's going to get real and you're going to get into an actual fight.
Well, maybe there's some sort of like element or focus like within these creatures that like the end goal is to destroy that monster and take that focus away. Like it's this one of a kind item or something very
like its heart.
Yeah, like basically the heart of this creature or something like that will absolutely set the country back years and years if it's taken from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could do that. It could be something like
I like that kind of puts it less on more of like a gentleman's agreement and more on like there's an actual point to this.
Mm-hmm. They are investing something in it. Yeah, that you could go that route. You have something like you have to pour a lot of magical energy into an object, and maybe that is the thing that you use to summon this creature or instantiate it to create it.
Sure.
That's where when you bring some magic users in and they all put their hands on this crystal or something, and it's from that the illusion arises. Yeah, you could.
I'm picturing just like a sea monkey pill, like just throw it out there, expands into a monster,
or those little sponge dinosaur things that you used to get.
Oh yeah.
Where you'd like it's like a little it's a gel tab for like medicine, and they drop it in the sink, and then it expands out into.
I had several of those as a kid.
Those were the bomb back in the day. That's how old we are.
Yeah.
So I think that if we're going to sort of pull on the idea of pro wrestling, maybe it's all very much about the heart of the battles and the drama of it, the sort of putting on a good show. This is essentially shadow puppetry.
Okay.
And the answer is not to go in where, it's not a gentleman's agreement. You go further in the other direction where it's all storylined.
Okay.
So, for example, two kings get together and they renegotiate their trade deal or their alliance or something, and they need to bring their subjects over onto their side. This would be how do we debut this new alliance between the two of us? Oh, here's what we'll do. We're going to have our kaiju fight. One will defeat the other, but then become battle bros out of it. Like they're going to have this long knockout, drag out fight. But the heart that one sees in the other means that at the end of it, they come out of it like blood brothers.
And then we introduce the third threat that they need to band together to deal with. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Where the idea that all of the nations in this world, or at least that are doing this one aspect of generating the kaiju, they all have not just a gentleman's agreement, but like an actual like council that they get together and they are the writers of this storyline. And so, for example, if
the shadow government for this world is just a writer's room.
It is absolutely a writer's room.
I love it.
And like country A, this is also, of course, like long into the development of this process. This isn't how it starts. This is how it's evolved over centuries to the point where, like, let's say country A has a drought and everybody's really down in the dumps because everything's going badly for them. So they get together with country B and country C and they write a storyline in which their kaiju gets to win a bunch. And that helps bring like morale and hope back to the people. And that, can actually just having your people stay strong and have a good time is actually a good way to like get them through a hard time.
Yeah. Bread and circuses.
Yeah.
Except in this case, circuses are giant fire-breathing lizards.
Yeah. A giant circus. In fact, you could even go so far as to say that maybe the emotion felt by the audience, which in this case is everybody's part of the audience, but that could have a magic in and of itself. Where by inspiring your people in one way or another, that could have a tangible effect on the world around them. Or maybe it's just that's what's fed into the kaiju to get it going. There is the trope of when the champion of the world is at its nearly at the climax and they've been beaten and broken, but they're lying on the ground they're about to be defeated, and then everybody like has the Tinkerbell moment where they're like, "We believe in you," and then all of them like cheer him on and he gets back up. That could be a for real actual transfer of energy.
Interesting. I like that. That's an interesting point or an interesting way to kind of address sort of that tipping of scales and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, and also it means that having a good design and a good story is more important because if you get some people in, like not just your country, but if some of the people in countries next to you or elsewhere in the world believe in your creature because it's such a good hero or it's got such a good story and they like it, and they're going to start throwing energy its way just through their fandom of it, through liking it. They're going to give you extra power in this world.
I like that, like, one of the most powerful offices would be Godzilla branding department.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It's all about marketing.
He's got merchandising and whatnot, and
Yeah.
whoever's got the coolest merch wins.
So, okay. In that case, maybe these things are actually a way of turning emotion energy, magic from people's hearts, into real effects in the world. They're the channel through which it happens. You inspire your peasants or your populace, and they pour their energy into this creature, which acts like a crucible or like an engine of some sort. And then some of it can be used in the fights and to sustain the creature itself, but some of it also might be put to use somewhere else in the country. Like in this sense, going back to our drought scenario, if everybody pours their excitement and love into this creature, you actually might be able to take that energy, that magic that you've gathered up through it. You throw the fight to get all of that juice going, but then you have all this energy left over because you were really only fighting another illusory creature. You weren't doing any work. And at the end of it, you turn that magic into transmuting stuff into food, or you call the rains back, you like affect the weather. That could be really cool.
Yeah, I like that aspect. I like the idea of kind of like a way of giving back, essentially.
And it makes all of this not just like a cheat, but like integral to keeping the world going and keeping everything moving along. And you could even, I wonder if you could have it, could they store the energy? Would it have to be used right away? Because you could have it be one of those things where if they can store it long term, or if you can store it somehow, then when things are really good, you can take some of that energy and sock it away.
Well, I think that's kind of an interesting way to approach it. I kind of like the idea that like it's the excitement of the moment that's powerful,
right?
And storing that would obviously diminish that. That's old news. That's,
right. So you've got to use it then, which is why they have to keep going back to the well.
Exactly.
And they keep introducing more and more convoluted storylines and big dramatic moments.
And if you've got like one nation that's just constantly winning over and over, it starts to become old hat. It's not as exciting.
Diminishing returns, which is why all of these nations have gotten together to plan things out.
I like it.
Because it's less effective if just one person wins. So you really do have to coordinate in order to make it interesting. That's fascinating.
Do you think there would be like some sort of market for them just like constantly coming up with like new kaiju? You know, you remember the defeat of our former kaiju.
Yeah.
But now there's a new contender who's come to save our country.
No, there absolutely is. There are guys in a back room somewhere, like character designers with giant sketchboards, like coming up with these creatures and stuff. And yeah, because if we're modeling a little bit after pro wrestling, there's always that new up and comer. Who's coming in and like they're trying them out. And even pro wrestling, a guy will come out with a gimmick and a character, and maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. And he'll be like, okay, let's put that on the drawing board. Let's like that same guy will come back then as a different person. And everybody, because of the kayfabe, everybody's like, oh yeah, that's totally a different person. We're not going to pretend like that's still Jim Bob or whatever.
Do you imagine they have like kaiju heels? Like these are the villain kaiju.
No, absolutely, yeah. If you're creating. Okay, so every town has their own kaiju, I'm sure.
Sure.
Some of those are probably jackasses who are currently in a heel moment. But there's probably also like quote unquote rogue kaiju.
Okay.
People or creatures that aren't associated with a particular area. And those are the ones that tend to be like the heels, like overall. Like they're the roving bands, the ones that have to like constantly be defended against. So you don't always have to have country A and country B fighting each other. Sometimes they're both ganging up on this like just rogue one. But those rogue quote unquote kaiju are maintained by all the same people. Like at the end of the day, they all go back to the same locker room and talk and just like hanging out with those guys. There is some debate about, and I know there are instances where in pro wrestling where the outcome's planned, but how you get there isn't. Like we know that you're going to win this fight or lose this fight, but in the moment, in the ring, it's very much of an improv kind of thing. It's not like, okay, we're going to do this and then we're going to do this and we're going to do this. And so you can imagine these guys, they're one person sitting next to their crystal controlling their kaiju, and just like his opponent is just right over there. Like they're like, you could reach out and touch him. And they're both like talking about like, okay, I'm going to put you into a suplex, and then I need you to pick me up and throw me over the mountain range so that I can land over here, and then I'm going to roll, and like we're going to get back up, and then like just coordinating it the whole time to make a good show. Like you could go so far as to say that a lot of the damage they do to the world around them is cheaper to just fake, where it's all illusions anyway. So we're going to knock over these buildings, and the buildings will be knocked over, and then at the end of the fight, You just kind of, everybody's just sort of ignores the fact that the building's still there.
And this is Spider-Man Far From Home spoilers here, but
Okay.
I'm kind of getting a feel of like the Mysterio in there, where he's kind of set himself up as this hero just through smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it turns out, like, that was the origin. It was the smoke and mirrors start. And then over time, it became a real thing where we figured out what to do with these creatures. I really like that idea.
Oh, yeah.
Using this as the basis for, like, what is going on in a world, like a D&D campaign, I'm not sure how much this would be useful, but this would be, like, a Powered by the Apocalypse game where you are the controllers of these kaiju would be so much fun. Where it's all about crafting the storyline and getting the points of energy from the crowd that you can then use elsewhere.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
That's a hell of an idea. I do not have time to put together an entire Powered by the Apocalypse game, but if someone else does, please do it. You have my, like, not just permission, but encouragement to please make that game. I want to play it.
But you have to tell us about it.
Yeah. You can't do it in secret. You have to tell the world. That's a pretty. We're only 24 minutes into the recording, and we've already got like a pretty solid idea. So I think at that point we need to start talking about actual kaiju. Like,
oh sure,
let's just make some stuff up. So there's the like first generation kaiju. I think the old ones, and some of those have to be like old guard. They're still around because Godzilla's still the best, and he's the first.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
King Kong's still around. He's the best. You know.
And
so
I figure like those initial ones, like, they're kind of dopey looking. They're like, one guy's like, oh, this is scary.
And they're all like a really, really simple concept. Like, this is a big monkey, you know? And I think in this case, I said monkey, I mean monkey. It's not an ape. This is a giant, like, gibbon, like, with their long, really weird arms and the tail, and they're all kind of lanky and stuff. And so we were in the mini episode before that we recorded just before this, we were talking about Pokemon. So I think if maybe that first generation, they might have elemental powers too. Is kind of like that's the fashion at the time.
This one breathes fire. This one throws lightning.
Yes, absolutely. But other than that, it's a very clear. They're not like, they haven't gone off the rails yet and gone for the wild ideas. They were just like, okay, this is a fire wolf. Like, this is a giant wolf who also breathes fire and has like a fiery mane. Yeah. And he's got just a very simple name, you know, Burner or something. And, you know, and the first crop of them came up, and some of them like didn't really catch on. And then, but we've got like, you know, the gibbon character and maybe a fire wolf, and maybe like, there's got to be one that's just really dopey but lovable.
Someone's just like saw a hippopotamus and was like, look at the jaws on that thing.
See, actual hippopotami are terrifying.
They are incredibly frightening.
So this is that first generation hippopotamus kaiju is instead like somebody's cartoon idea of a hippopotamus.
Yeah,
where it's not threatening at all. Like, it doesn't have the like horrible teeth. It's just like this big kind of dopey thing, and it's kind of all too smooth. I love that.
He had a hippopotamus described to him at one point, and he just kind of based it off his loose description.
Yes. I love it. And there's
like, I'm just thinking like all the classic Spider-Man villains. Just
totally.
Like, you got the rhino, the vulture.
Yes, or just like mascots. Like, it looks kind of like a dude in a suit, or like so like it's like there's the lion character, and he's a lion, but like he's really like a guy in a lion suit. Like, he's still got regular human hands, and he's kind of buff in a human way, but he's got a lion head on top.
They're all just sports team mascots.
They could totally, like, that first generation should have a lot of sports team mascot vibes to it. That sort of old school wrestling, kind of hokey, and there's a lot of them fell off. You know, you've got the golden mouse or something like that, who nobody really cared for them, you know. But then you've got the strong ones, the ones that really have a history to them. And they've all of them have been heels at one point and have come back and been heroes, and they go back. There's like a revolving door. And then as time gets on, you start to see the evolution into they start taking themselves more seriously, like comic books in the 90s, where they all get grim and dirty. And they all have giant spikes and huge teeth and stuff like that.
And way too many pouches for some reason.
Yes, and all of their feet are vaguely defined. They never really figured out how to make illusory feet.
Liefeldian kaiju, I love it. Yeah,
and they're all like the anatomy's just a little bit off. Like,
why is that one's waist so small?
Does that one's spine even work? And they all have like just way over the top names, like Blood Gorger,
Death Claw.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So okay, where do you go from that? Is it more memey after that, where like they're a little bit cuter and a little bit? You come back around.
I figure kind of like they needed to get like pathos, or maybe there's a population boom, so they had a lot of kids that they needed to get that energy from. So they went a little more Saturday morning cartoons with it.
Yeah, totally. In fact, you could have. I mean, there's like a minor league version.
There's a little league.
There's a little, the Kaiju Little League, which is only sort of big. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah, where you have all these people who are essentially like bards, like they're the traveling musicians, but instead they create creatures, and then they there was a history of wrestling in American wrestling in the like 19th century.
Okay.
Traveling show style. Like it was strong men who went from town to town just being like, nobody can beat me up. And famously, this is what Abe Lincoln did for a while.
Really?
Yes, Abe Lincoln was a traveling wrestler, and
that's amazing.
Reportedly was undefeated in his time, which is because he had this huge, long, lanky arms that apparently was very hard to get inside on his reach and stuff.
Interesting.
And so you can imagine that you've got the the quote unquote big leagues, but of these giant like world shaking events that happen up in the sky. Like everybody sees these every night because they are literally too big to ignore. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the minor league of just like man-sized creatures that get created. And you've got these people who come in and they put on a little show for the crowd everywhere just to sort of get everybody livened up and enjoying themselves.
Well, I'm sure there's like some of these Shadow Council of Writers Room or whatnot who are just like, hey, we can take this principle and apply it on a smaller scale, on a more personal scale.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also a place for you to test drive ideas. And like you throw out your like early version of a kaiju and see how people react so that you can then bring him back later big. I love it. In fact, if we want to tie this into one of the other like big places where kaijus are seen is on those like Power Ranger style TV shows, Kamen Rider and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things with those is that all these monsters start small, fighting like regular sized guys, and then they get made big at some point during the episode, and then they have to fight the guy in the big robot suit. Yeah. And so this is that storyline brought to life, where like you have the small version, the man-sized version of it, and at some point he gets promoted up to the big leagues, and now he's got to fight the giant creatures.
I always wonder why they didn't just start off with the big monster and just...
I don't know. You'd have to ask one of the writers. I do know that I think it's a Kamen Rider villain, like gets wise to the idea, and he's like, "No, don't get big. If you get big, you're going to get killed. Like, don't get big. If you stay small, you're going to live. But if you get big," so he refuses to get big, which I like that a lot.
That's kind of amazing. Yeah,
he's just like, "No, I'm too genre savvy for this. You're not gonna get me up in there."
So I like that next generation is maybe more kid focused or a little more friendly or cute.
Yeah, I think third generation is the kid focused.
I think by that point they've started doing focus studies.
Yes,
they've started like going like, okay, what are the exact elements of these kaiju that generate the most loyalty from fans, get the most excitement?
Yes, and we know that we have to make the eyes they have to be kind of big so that people will think they're cute, but then it can't be too big because then it gets uncanny.
Yeah, so that you start getting like these hyper-engineered creatures that are just like, they don't look like any particular animal, but they all have sort of like animalistic features.
Yes. They've been kind of assembled from various parts and designed, and they end up looking like the Indominus Rex from Jurassic World, which is like not a real creature. It's just designed to look like it might be real.
And it's supposed to be like the T-Rex killer, where before the T-Rex was the be-all, end-all predator. Yeah. It was the cool dinosaur. Oh, but now there's the Indominus Rex.
I think that at least some places go heavy into the theme, I think. So like you have like a nation that is always dinosaur stuff. Like that's always their thing. And
absolutely.
They start off with like the Godzilla, and then they've got the heavier and harder Godzilla that never really took off. Like they tried to push it as their second gen Godzilla killer. Yeah. And it just never took off because everybody liked the original too much, and it's got too much history. And the other one wasn't different enough. But you had that period where they really tried to push it and make it successful, and it just didn't take off.
It was the 2000 reboot of Godzilla.
What do they call it? Geno, Godzilla in name only, which I love. Yeah, that's great. And yeah, they're all powered by the system. And as this whole shadow puppetry thing goes on, you have more and more of the secret sort of leak out into the public consciousness, and to a point where it might get to be like Santa Claus, where like everybody of a certain age knows it's quote unquote fake, but they still love it because it's such a big part of their culture. And you kind of let the little kids like believe for a while, and then at some point they're going to have to figure it out. But it's kind of a taboo. Like everybody knows, but it's kind of a taboo to talk about it openly that it's a fake.
What if it's like a real taboo to like talk about openly? Like the country's future like depends on everyone participating in this. So maybe there's like secret police or whatever that are like making sure that you're invested in this.
Yeah. You could go through.
I'm sure there's some cultures where that's the case.
Yeah. You could either have it be like that was one time period where we thought we had to keep the secret really tightly held. And so it was like a totalitarian government. And then we transitioned later once we figured out that, no, it turns out that people are willing to throw their faith behind just like fictional things all the time.
I also kind of love the idea of like maybe a long time ago there was like the Kaiju Cold War.
Oh,
where there's like two nations that were just like constantly upping their kaiju game. And, you know, maybe it was scripted or maybe it wasn't.
I think at that point it's not even a Cold War. It's just like an arms race.
Yeah.
Like it's a kaiju arms race.
But maybe there was like this threat of mutually assured destruction or something with the ever increasing scale of these kaiju.
I think it's not mutually assured destruction, except it's like mutually assured disbelief. Like it's a point at which they know that if they go too far, that it becomes unbelievable.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that's how that particular stage ends. Like that's generation 2, where everything got super serious and super grim and all the power levels went way up.
Yeah, maybe there was like some guy who was like, my kaiju's the size of the moon, and everyone's like, no, that's stupid.
Yeah, no, we don't like that anymore.
And then like his country just got erased.
Yes, it just like all of the heart went out of it, and and all of they no longer had that power available to them to keep their crops going and to control the weather and keep everything nice and safe for all their people. So even though the other kaiju couldn't come in and actually stomp all over the country for real, just not having your populace behind your kaiju is enough to kill off your nation. Or
maybe like they did battle and like it was just ludicrous that this moon-sized kaiju was getting kicked around by this, you know.
If this is a world where, you know, everybody knows about all of the different kaiju because you can see them, they're so big, you know, and maybe there's some way to I do like the idea that you can just release, like you can go up on a big hill at night and just watch like two cities over, see the big kaiju fight. But also maybe there's like news gets around and troubadours tell the.
I mean, if they've got like magic, you can sort of introduce some sort of like maybe live broadcast or something.
Yeah. You can hand wave that. But what I'm thinking is if your nation's kaiju really sucks and all of your populace like stop being fans of it and start being fans of another one, they're sending their power to that one. And it could lead to like chaos, like literally just all of the heart goes out of your nation. Like nobody's willing to participate in government anymore because your mascot sucks basically. And like, you might just like up and leave. Like, no, this sucks. I don't like living here. And like, nobody wants to work for the government and we're not participating. We're not going to follow your laws. Screw you. And they all just up and leave and the place just collapses.
What do you call a country governed by a giant monster? What kind of ocracy is that?
I mean, like, if you want to hand wave it, you say Kaijuocracy, but I think actually I would go for something more like, well, whatever the Greek word for like heart or emotion is. Like it's about the symbol.
Interesting.
Where it's everybody's banding up behind this creature, like a thing that is an avatar for them as a whole. And they throw their support behind that. And especially in the later stages of the development of this system where everybody's really, you know, almost the most important thing about your everyday life is which kaiju you're backing at any particular moment. You really could find that the nations that are participating in this might become somewhat more fluid in terms of like who counts as being in what nation. Like because to be part of a nation, kind of all you need to do is switch your fandom from one to another.
Interesting.
Despite where you are. I kind of like that idea late game where it's like I'm a member of country A, but country B's guy's doing a lot better and I really like him. So I'm going to switch my allegiance to him. And that like changes the laws that govern my, like who I am, like what I can do.
Wouldn't that also like kind of behoove you to support your local hero? Or
exactly.
If you want to benefit from, you know, the rainfall or whatever.
So there's a real direct benefit to doing the local guy. But there's nothing stopping you from hitting up like the one that's across the way because you just really like it.
I mean, like maybe there's, you know, a few you have an investment in that just you used to live over across the hill where
Yeah.
they had a different kaiju, and you kind of want to see that guy do well. He took care of you for a long time.
And you could probably be a quote unquote fan of several different ones in terms of just like, you know, I keep up with, like you do with sports teams, where it's like, I'm going to keep up with what Mothra is doing and Godzilla is doing because I like them both. And if they ever fight, I do know which one I would root for at that time. But since they don't usually fight each other, I'm totally cool with that. I think that's all cool. Yeah. I love the idea of a world where kind of the engine of life is kept alive by that belief in it being, you know, cool, basically. Like we just want to watch cool stories on our up in the sky at night. That's really fun. In fact, that might be sort of their replacement for religion as well.
Oh yeah.
Over time, they could start to describe like, oh well, why does the sun rise in the morning? Oh yeah, well it's one of these guys. He rolls it up the hill of the side of the world and flings it into the sky every morning. That's his thing. So all that like creation and how does the world myth really could be handled by this. And it's not true in the sense that it's always been true, but because everybody believes it's true, it might as well be true. I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, so we do have to get around the glaring hole in this whole idea that they wouldn't actually be causing that much destruction for real. And a kaiju that doesn't destroy cities is
hardly a kaiju at all.
It's almost not even a kaiju. Yeah. So there was the idea I mentioned earlier, which is that they create illusory damage, or maybe they build stuff specifically to be knocked over.
Yeah, I mean, like that first scenario would sort of like explain how, you know, Tokyo is always rebuilt the next time Godzilla comes knocking.
Yeah, and it could be like a mixture where like, okay, we're gonna make an illusory building over here, and then we're gonna make like an actual like it's just made of balsa wood and paper building over here, and when it gets knocked down, like it doesn't take that much magic to actually knock it down, and then we have got some rubble, and that really sells it for the crowd.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, totally. And I think there's also got to be like,
I mean, what would pro wrestling be without props, right?
Exactly. Giant folding chairs. I'm also thinking there could be some evidence, like if you're really proud of your kaiju, your city might have some like fake rubble that they leave around that they've like, oh yeah, our Godzilla, we have this giant Godzilla footprint in our park that we dug ourselves. Because everybody knows that it's not true, but like we really want it to be true. So we're just going to make stuff like just to sell it.
Oh, I imagine like every city has like landmarks or something that like.
Oh yeah, totally.
Remember when it was destroyed in 2003 by Godzilla's attack on our city?
Oh yeah, and they like, in fact, you might even see like people get a little suspicious because they're building the rubble before the fights happened.
Yeah,
they're just putting it, and they realize, oh, that's a future storyline that's going to happen in a couple of months' time.
Spoilers.
Yeah, exactly. We've got to put the giant like scaffolding up around.
Construction workers have NDAs.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so it's just all fake, just down to the ground. Everything's fake. I love it. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've pretty well handled this idea. It's not going to be a very long episode because it just kind of flopped to the table fully formed.
Well, it's a great idea with you know, we have a strong basis to go from. So
yeah. Okay. So yeah, the shadow puppetry pro wrestling kaiju. Somebody please make this as an RPG. I want to play it.
I love it.
All right. Well, bye.
Yeah, see ya.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Monster Mechanics. You can find links and show notes at our website, monsterpod.org. Or if you'd like to support us, head on over to patreon.com/monsterpod. We can be found on Twitter at monstermpod, or you can email us at monstermechanicspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear your feedback. Monster Mechanics is produced and edited by Scott Paladin. This episode was hosted by Scott Paladin and Zach Jaquays. All of the ideas produced during this podcast are released under a do what the f*** you want public license.